after this month.
Right.
And if they get a shovel in the ground by the end of the summer, and, you know, we'll still have the Bridgeport Hall won't be done until probably September. We're gonna need 2 people on that high school, I'm sure, because it's a rather big project.
Okay. In reading your minutes, in this discussion, it sounded like there was a fair amount of conversation as to whether or not 2 people, 3 people, whatever it was, plus all that staff was really necessary, given what the future looks like.
Yeah,
And
well,
that's the reason for the question.
well, yeah, but one of the girls that are there has a tremendous insight and knowledge of the history of the building department and the things that are done by the building department. She's very, very knowledgeable, and we'd hate like hell to lose her. So then the only other one would be she's basically the person who does the introductory on the building permits, you know, paperwork and stuff like that. And then, of course, John is the building chief, and he's state certified, and we have to have him, regardless if we go down to one person, we still got to have a building chief inspector certified by the state.
During the building of the high school, how often would one of our inspectors be on site?
It will depend on what's going on the job. I mean, you may have somebody who's specialized and is very knowledgeable about concrete and slump testing and stuff like that, and you may have a guy who's over there doing an electrical inspection. So it's hard to tell when the building is so big and spread out that I would say you'd have to, very frequently, you'd have 2 inspectors there at a time. Because, you know, there's a lot to do. There's stadium work that has to be done, ADA requirements have to be satisfied. You've got all kinds of steel construction that's gonna be going on, and you gotta have people there who know what the hell they're doing.
Okay, I guess the point I'm trying to make, or the question I'm trying to get an answer to is it would appear to me that even with something like that, you know, that the volume of work that would go through that department has decreased dramatically.
Oh, yeah, it has, as far as new starts are concerned, but there's still a lot of work that's being done commercially, and there's also a lot of people doing renovations. So, yeah, the permits on new houses and things like that are down, but there's an awful lot of renovation work and commercial work that's
There
still
is?
going on. Oh, yeah.
Did you guys take a look at documentation that supports that?
No, we just did it based on hearsay, you know, John Podel, who was the chief inspector.
Well, I guess, Joe, it would be helpful for, at least for me, to have a little bit more clarity, because that's one of the things that stuck out in my mind. I would be shocked if there's a commensurate level of commercial development this year versus last year. I know that there's not the building of houses this year versus last year. I got to imagine that the workflow in that office, just to start, is down dramatically. I would also have a tough time basing the staffing level, which is the biggest problem, I shouldn't say problem, but the biggest cost that this town faces, not only in your area, but in the Board of Education's area, basing that on hearsay. So from any information that you could provide to the next meeting to substantiate that, and/or have that individual come, I think it would be helpful.
Okay.
My hunch is that for the year that we're approaching and what we're going through, and with 3 inspectors and the staff that's in there, whether or not you have this 3rd inspector there or not there, it would seem to me that the workflow, even with the high school, that's a pretty, I mean, you basically, if I'm not mistaken, got the same staff that we had when we had other things going on, like the Reed School, and all the building in town going on, and I'm quite confident that that's not happening now. So I'd like to understand the justification for that a little bit better.
Okay.
Other questions?
I'd like to ask you, Joe, about the flip side to that, and that has to do with looking for economies of scale, and particularly with respect to land use and economic development and the economic development director. The flip side to John's question is I'm somewhat familiar with the land use department, and they are doing a considerable amount of work, and I know that they do a number of grants I'm not sure what the economic how many the economic, do you know how many grants the Director of Economic Development has done in the last 2 years?
We get a report on a monthly basis from Liz Stocker on grants, and
And
we've
how
got,
many have we done in the last, has she done in the last 2 years?
how many what?
How many has she done in the last 2 years?
I would have to check that, I don't know, but,
Get the root of your question.
Yeah. I know the land use department is doing, in other words, I know the land use department is doing
Yeah.
a number of grants. I know a lot of the development people go to the land use department.
yeah,
Now I see that the economic development has been broken off from the land use department.
yes,
I see that Danbury has cut the economic development director position to a part-time job. Just seems to me by dividing the process, that becomes more costly, where you can have one or a part-time position plus the land use department doing the same work, working with the same people. I mean, as far as economic development goes, I have here, and I pulled this off of the Town of Newtown website, available buildings in Newtown. These are commercial buildings, 25. I have available sites in Newtown. These are sites, these aren't buildings, these are
Just
large
land,
plots
just
of
raw
commercial
land?
development land. 10. Vacant industrial and zoned land, 39. I don't know, in this economy, how much economic development is gonna be transpiring, at least for the next year or two. And to be having two separate entities who are doing somewhat of the same thing. It just, for economies of scale, it would seem more appropriate to combine them, so that we have one person doing the grants. I mean, we have people doing, the land use people are doing grants, I understand. I believe Liz Stocker does do a couple grants, I'm not sure exactly how many. And then on occasion in the past, we've had an outside consultant do grants. Seems to me that there should be, when it comes to development and land use and what have you, we should be having one entity doing the grants.
Well-
And one plan and one,
okay,
and
well,
one direction.
to answer that question, at one time, before I came into office, the land use, or Liz Stocker, a part of her salary came out of the Board of Selectmen's, out of the Selectmen's budget, and the other part came out of land use. When I got into office, I personally felt, because I was a former chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission years ago, and I just felt that, and Liz Stocker was doing both grants and she was also doing land use. And I felt that this was essentially a conflict of interest, because she's out there trying to get people to come to town, and then when they get there, they come to the planning and zoning, and she's telling them, well, you can't do this, that, or the other thing. To me, that was a conflict of interest. And that's why we established broke it out, so she is handling just grants and things like that. Right now, she's working very hard on the ATIM thing, which is a $20 million operation, which we're trying very hard to get into the Pitney Bowes building.
Well, I think you make my point for me though, Joe. If you think that the economic development director is working and attempting to attract people independently into
Well,
developers.
she's working with the Economic Development Commission.
Okay, and
Yeah.
working with them to bring business into the town.
Right.
Then they go to the land use, and land use says, oh, well, what so-and-so has said, or what you thought, isn't correct, or can't be done, or there's a difficulty or problem. Now you have someone who's interested in bringing business to Newtown, but says, basically, what's going on here? One set or entity is entertaining these thoughts on our behalf, and this entity is saying, well, no, you can't do it because of regulations, environment, things to that effect. Seems to me it makes more sense, economic sense, as well as practical sense, to have the economic director